This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so let us begin. And first of all, a thank you to Dr. Ray and Nina Zuckerman for sponsoring the Lunch and Learn today in honor and memory of Ray's late father, Wolf Zuckerman.
That's why I'm Ramon Benzev.
Ramon Benzev. That's got it. Okay. Okay.
Ukraine.
Ukraine. Okay, so we thank you. And when is the actual yard site, Doctor? Today. Okay. 9th of Tevet. Okay, so we will be discussing the fast day that begins tomorrow. Anybody who didn't hear the announcement, so even though the calendar says we're supposed to start Mincha 4:40 tomorrow, however, being that fast day, we have reading of Torah reading, we have Haftorah, therefore we will be starting at 4:25. Dov Shamata, 4:25 Mincha tomorrow. Okay, so let's get a handle on the fast days that we have and the significance of this fast day and actually a unique aspect of this fast day. Right? So the line begins, why do we fast even Friday, even Shabbat? Now, of course, our calendars are already now all arranged, meaning as opposed to the new months being determined by witnesses who see the new moon, and that will determine is a month going to be 29 or 30 days. The lunar year, an actual lunar month is 29, roughly 29 and a half days. So half the months are going to be 30 days, half the months will be 29 days, giving us our 354 days to the lunar calendar. But the actual determination was based upon witnesses coming and testifying. If they came, then that would be a 29-day month. Day 30 would be Rosh Chodesh. If they didn't come, by default, it would be a 30-day month, and day 31 would be Rosh Chodesh. It can never be more than that. You know, you have overcast skies for a few weeks. It will not give us a 50-day month. That's not how it works. Okay, now our calendar, though, is set with the destruction of the temple, which we'll deal with soon, and with the Sanhedrin, the head Jewish court, no longer ruling on such things. Therefore, we have a set calendar, which is a 19-year cycle calendar. And that's why every 1938, 57, 76, 95 years, birthdays of all of ours, we should all enjoy many of those. Why not even a 114? So all of those, so there, your Hebrew and English birthdays will once again coincide. Okay, so nowadays, the way the calendar was set up, it will never come out on Shabbos, but there is an opinion that if it would fall out on Shabbos, then we would fast this fast day even on Shabbos, which is quite strange because we know when Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, it gets pushed off to Sunday. But there's an opinion that says this would not. So let's understand the fasting, let's understand in general, and let us begin. So a fast day is not simply as a means of a reset button, right? It's not in order to you have all these things being advertised to cleanse your gut, right? That's not what it's about. And it's not the idea of a fast day is that when we're less involved in the physical, it allows us to become more connected to the spiritual and to try to elevate ourselves beyond the material and the physical of this world. Of our 5 rabbinic fast days, 4 of them are Jerusalem related. Okay? The exception would be right, Tanit Esther before Purim. But the others are all Jerusalem related. And it begins with this fast. On the 10th of Tevet, that is when the siege, the Babylonian siege on Jerusalem began. 2.5 years later is when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. and that is the fast that we have on the 17th of Tammuz in the summer. 3 weeks after that, the temple was destroyed, and that is the fast that we have 3 weeks after that on the 9th of Av. And then the governor, the Jewish governor that had been appointed, was named Gedaliah, was assassinated by another Jew at the employ of the nations, the non-Jewish nations around, and that caused a further splintering that of those that remained, many of them fled out of fear. And that was the final stage of this 4th stage. So we have the siege, which is tomorrow. We have 2.5 years later, on the 17th of Tammuz, we have the breaching of the walls. 3 weeks after Tisha B'Av, we have the destruction of the temple. And then on the day of the assassination of Gedaliah, that is when even those who were remaining, majority of them fled. Let's look into this fast, the 10th of Tevet, and let's look at source number 1. Vayihi, this is from the book of Kings, the book of prophets, Malachim 25, beginning of that chapter. Vayihi b'shnata Shi'it, and it was in the 9th year, L'malcho, of his reign, this is Nebuchadnezzar. B'chodesh ha'asiri, the 10th month, that's our present month. Be'esor lachodesh, on the 10th of the month, that is tonight and tomorrow. Ba Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel hu v'chol chelo al Yerushalayim. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and all of his armies came upon Jerusalem. Vayichan aleh, and camped against it. Vayivnu aleh dayeg saviv, and built these different forts around it, laying siege to the city. Batavo ha'ir bamatzor, and the city was in a state of siege. Ad ashtei asar shana lemelech Tzidkiyahu, until the 11th year of King Tzidkiyahu. I'm sorry, when it said lemalcho, it meant his reign, meaning Tzidkiyahu. Third pasuk, batish'a lachodesh. On the 9th, so that is the 10th of the 10th month. That is tomorrow. But then pasuk 3 speaks about the breach of the walls. When would we expect that to be, based on our schedule and our fasting? The month of Tammuz, which day? The 17th of Tammuz. Yet, the pasuk says, Batish'a lachodesh, on the 9th of that month, V'yechazak hara b'ir, the famine became overwhelming, strengthened. Lo yala lechem, there was no food, no bread for the people of the land. Batibaka ha'ir, and the wall was, the city was breached. And all the Anshe Milchama, that night, they fled out through a different area. So if the walls were actually breached on the 9th of the month, why do we fast on the 17th of the month? So there were 2 destructions. There was the destruction of the first and of the second temple. Whereas the destruction of both happened on the same date, which was the 9th of Av. However, the breach of the walls of the city of the first, we're talking about here, the first temple was on the 9th. The second was on the 17th. So why do we go by the 17th, by the second temple, instead of the first temple and the 9th? What would you say, my friends?
That's the final.
That's the final. That's the gullus. That's the exile that we are in right now. This first exile lasted a 70-year Babylonian exile, and then Ezra, we'll soon hear about him, was instrumental, him and Nehemiah, in the building of the second temple. So our present exile is that of the destruction of the second temple, and therefore that date of the breach of the city of the second temple, the 17th of Tammuz, that is what is commemorated now by us by the fast day on the 17th of Tammuz. But there were other reasons also. And if you'll skip down, just skip for a moment the Talmud Megillah 9a, go to beneath that, we have the Slichot 10th of Tevet. So, and that's starting the very bottom of the first side, and then we'll flip over to the second side, both Hebrew and English, so follow in whichever manner is most comfortable for you. On these fast days, just as we do on the days prior to Rosh Hashanah and in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have tefillot incorporated into our morning shachar and morning prayers called slichot. The source, the root of that is slicha, forgiveness. So we recognize that these fast days are also days where we seek forgiveness. And the slichot of each of these fast days tells the story of that fast day. And our slichot, which we'll say tomorrow, all are welcome to join us. Shachar begins at 6:30. Ezkara, I will remember. Matzok, the distress. Asher Kara'ani, that called out to me. B'shalosh makot. Oh, there were 3 hits, 3 blows. B'chodesh hazeh hikani, that we were hit with in this month with 3 blows. Gid'ani, heni'ani, hech. 1 second. Yeah, I just have to move something over here. Why it's not letting me? There we go. Gid'ani, heni'ani, hich'ani. I was cut down. I was prevented, held back. Hich'ani, I was hit. Achata hel'ani. And now I am so weary. What are these 3 hits? Diachani b'shmona bo smalit v'yimanit. I was hit on the 8th day from the left and the right. Halosh losheton kavati tanit. On all 3 of these days, I established them as a fast. Really, it was 3 consecutive fast days, which we have now coagulated all of them into one on the 10th. What are these 3? Umelech Yavan, the king of Yavan, that's the Gemara that we above will see in a moment. Insani, forced me, lichtov dat Yivanit, to write the Torah into Greek. That's what we call the Septuagint. Al gabi charshu charshim, herichu ma'anit. Notice that this is poetry, the way that this is written. It's written in very, very poetic language. Al gabi, on my back, charshu charshim, they plowed their plowing. Herichu ma'anit, to make these long, deep furrows in amongst the Jewish people. Zo'amti b'tish'a bo b'chlima v'chefer. I was so furious on the 9th day with klima, with embarrassment, v'chefer, and shame. What happened? Chasach me'alai mi'il hod v'tsefer. There was removed from me, there was stripped from me the garment which was of glory, v'tsefer, and how do they call it? And alacrity. Tarov toraf bo hanotain imre shefer. Torn away from us was the one who had given us those beautiful words. Who is that? Who? Ezra Hasofer. That is Ezra, the one who led us back after the Babylonian exile for the start of the Second Commonwealth. Yom Asiri. So that's number 9. That's the 9th of Tevet. That's the second reason why we're fasting. Yom Asiri, on the 10th day, Tsuvabi Bozi HaChozeh. The prophet Yechezkel, the son of Bozi, decreed, Kitav L'cha B'Sefer HaMachazeh, to write down in this book of prophecy, L'zikaron la'am namas v'nivzeh, as a remembrance for this nation that is now melted and disgraced, at etzem hayom hazeh, that this very day, that was the day of the siege being laid upon Jerusalem.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the context of Ezra, the scribe he killed, is that related to, was he killed?
Not
What
killed,
was the
died.
circumstance?
Not killed, died.
So that's just natural death.
Natural
Because
death.
everything else is kind of related to, Yavan is an enemy. But that seems to be just, I'm not sure.
A loss.
Yeah, it's a loss.
Yeah,
but not connected to the theme of everything else.
correct, correct. So what is this? Let's look above what I skipped. Again, still on the first side. Talmud Megillah 9a. The Gemara there tells the story that of the translation of the Torah into Greek. Now you might ask, hey, Rabbi, you've got a nice translation of the Gemara here. And we use the stone Chumash, which is a beautiful English translation. So what's wrong? This was the first art scroll. They were ahead of their time. What is wrong with the Torah being translated into Greek? So, two factors. One is, am I doing it in order to increase the honor of the Torah, or am I doing it in order to decrease the honor of the Torah? Art Scroll translating, and all those who translate, Art Scroll, Kaplan, Koren, who all do amazing jobs, that is in order to make the Torah accessible to all Jews, regardless of their proficiency in Hebrew. And it's a beautiful thing. I use Sefaria.org, an amazing resource online for translate an incredible amount of sources and translations. An amazing resource. That's being done lahagdil Torah ladira, to raise the Torah up, to let everyone appreciate it. What's happening over here is they were doing it in order to degrade the Torah and to find what they thought would be proofs in the Torah to their mistaken, erroneous beliefs. Okay? And the Medrash actually compares it to a lion. Remember when many years ago I brought my kids to the zoo, right? And by the lion's area, so you would look down by the lion's area. There's also was a place with a hopefully very thick plexiglass, and you're up against, literally right there, the lions are right there. So no obstruction, just that glass. And there was this little girl there who was doing this little dance in front of the window there. And it was bringing the lion to this state of rage. It was against the glass, and smacking it with his paws, right? And everyone is crowding around. It was an incredible sight to see, and people are laughing. And I thought to myself, right, if this were a movie, this would be the scene the moment before the glass cracked. That was the scene it would have been. Oh, let me see. Crack. Right? But that's what the Medrash compares the Torah being translated into Greek. Meaning, it gives a parable of a lion, a ferocious lion, that everyone was in awe of this lion. And then it's put into a cage and it's paraded around and everyone throws little pebbles at it. And all of a sudden it has become stripped of his grandeur, of the awe that everyone felt. And that's what they were looking to do with this Torah translated to Greek, to break it down. It's not such a big deal, right? We even have the Reader's Digest, condensed Bible, right? You don't have to cut out the stuff that's really unnecessary, right? That was the stripping down that took place. But besides that, and that's why it is a fast day. The day that this happened is a fast day. It is a sad, tragic day for us. But he was looking to find fault in the Torah. And therefore he was going to twist the words of the Torah. So he wanted to make sure that there was no rabbinic committee that would prevent any of what he thought would be the translations that would prove his false belief. Therefore, what did he do? Mishum Maisa de Talmi Amelech. I'm now Talmud Megillah 9a, Hebrew and English. The Tanya that we learned. Mas had happened, V'talmi Amelech, Shekine Shiva Mishnayim Zekanim. He gathered together 72 of the elders, of the scholars, V'chanisam B'shim Mishnayim Batim, put him into 72 different homes, V'lo Gila Lahem, without telling them, Alma Kinsan, what was the purpose of him gathering them? So there could be no collusion prior to this. V'nichnas, then he entered Eitzakol Echad V'echad to each and every one, and said to them, Kitvuli Torah Moshe Rabchem, write for me, translate for me into Greek the Torah of Moses, your teacher. God put counsel into the heart of each and every one, and they all had the same exact translation with certain changes that were made. The Kotlo, they wrote, not Bereshit, in the beginning, bara Elokim, God created. Rather, they said, Elokim bara Bereshit. God created in the beginning. What was the concern? If they'd say, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, he would say, oh, Bereshit is the name of a super God. Bara Elokim, and that super God named Bereshit, that created Elokim. That created God. So you see, there's not just one God, there are multiple gods. There's not just Hashem Echad. So instead they wrote Elokim, God created Bereshit in the beginning, the heaven and earth.
This is what they're writing in Greek?
In Greek.
So but on the Hebrew side, it preserves...
They didn't touch the Hebrew.
Okay, the Hebrew there and the
Hebrew is untouched.
Who are they who wrote it? Those were the
72
rabbis.
scholars of that time
Those
period.
were the Jewish
Jewish
So
leading
they
scholars.
twisted the meaning of the Torah.
They didn't twist.
So
They made the Torah's meaning not twistable. Meaning the Torah says in the Bereshit, in the beginning, God created. That's the meaning of the
that's how
Torah.
the rabbis translated it.
But they wrote in
Who are
Greek,
they?
the rabbis, when they translated to Greek, they wrote, God created in the beginning. Why? Not in the beginning, God created. Lest he would twist it and say, there is a super deity named in the beginning, Bereshit, and that created God. In which case he would have proof to his mistaken belief that there was a multiplicity of gods in the world.
Rabbis translated Torah into Greek.
Yes.
70 rabbis.
Yes,
They all translated
72.
72. Why didn't they translate it correctly then?
Because he would twist it.
Who are he?
The king, the Greek king that commissioned them to do this, would commission them in order that he could find fault in the Torah and twist it for his belief in in many gods. So therefore, in order that he would not be able to twist it, they translate it in a way that it would give the true meaning of the Torah. In the beginning, God created. God created in the beginning, as opposed to him saying there's a super God called beginning, and that was the beginning of everything, who created the God that created the world. So they cannot twist it. Other things they changed. Ese Adam B'Tselem. The pasuk says, let me if it's not clear, let me deal with you afterwards. I don't want to spend too much time on it. The pasuk says, Nase Adam, let us make man. We learn that God conferred with the heavenly angelic sphere that they should all have some buy-in over there. But, and to this day, people say, so you see, so there's not one God. There's more than one God, or there are different parts of God. So they wrote, Ese Adam, I will make Adam. The pasuk says, and God, Vayichal Elokim b'yom hashvi'i, melachto asher asa, vayishbot b'yom hashvi'i, v'kol melachto asher asa. When we make Kiddush, we say, and God finished on the seventh day the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. Well, did he stop on the seventh day? So he stopped either at that split moment when the seventh day was about to begin, right? Or he created on the seventh day the idea of rest, of non-creation. But he would twist that and say, so you see, God finished his work on the seventh day. So why are all you Jews leaving work early on Friday? You see, you can finish your work on the seventh day. So instead they wrote he finished on the sixth day and he rested on the seventh day. One I don't have over here is that one of the non-kosher animals is an arnevet, right? His wife's name was Arnevet, and therefore he was afraid that they were afraid that he would say, "Oh, you put my wife's name in there as a non-kosher animal, right? That is a revolt." So they changed it from Arnevet to the Ketsei Raglayim, the short-legged animal. Okay, so once again, this was a demeaning, a lowering of the stature of the Torah. And therefore, that's a reason that we fast. That happened on the 8th of Tevet. That's a reason to fast on that day. That was yesterday. And then the death of Ezra, that's today, the 9th of Tevet. That's a reason to fast today. Don't worry, I only told you that after you finished your lunch already, so you're all safe, right? And then the 10th of Tevet is the reason to fast on, and the siege of Jerusalem is the reason to fast on the 10th of Tevet. Like I said, we incorporate all those three fasts into the one day, and we fast tomorrow. Starting tomorrow at 5:37 is when the fast begins. A.M. Correct. And I think it ends like 5:52. So that would be 5:42. Yeah. So it's not a 5-minute. It's not a 5-minute fast. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. So why does this fast day have this unique arrangement that we will fast, right? Very rare for us to fast on a Friday, right? And according to some, we would even fast on Shabbat if the 10th would fall out on Shabbat. Okay? It never does, and most poskim, halachic deciders, disagree with that opinion of the Abu Dram that we would fast on Shabbat if we fell out on Shabbat, but we do fast on Friday, unusual. Why is that? Let's take a bit of a deeper dive. The Gemara Tanit, that's on the second side of this of the sheet that I gave you. Sorry, there we go. The Gemara Tanit says as follows. This is discussing the destruction of the temple, which we commemorate on the 9th of Av, the 9th of the month of Av. Gemara there says, Ha Ketzad, how did it all come about? B'Shiva, because there are different verses that seem to give different dates, the 7th, the 9th, the 10th. B'Shiva nichnesu nicharim lehechal. On the 7th, that is where they entered into the temple. Va'achlu, and they desecrated there by eating there. V'kilkulubo, and they desecrated it there. Shiva, on the 7th. Shmini, the 8th. Tishi'i, and on the 9th. Samuch l'chashecha, when it was almost nightfall, following the 9th day, almost the start of the 10th day, hitzitu boet ha'or. That is where they ignited it with fire. Vayadolek v'holech, and it continued burning. Kol hayom kulo, that entire day, through the 10th day, that is where it was burning. Shenemar says, Oy lanu, woe to us, kipanu hayom, that the day is ending. Ki yinatu tsulale erev, and the evening shadows are being extended. V'hainu dam Rav Yochanan, that's what Rav Yochanan said. Ilmale ayiti ba'otodor, Rav Yochanan was a sage much later than that. But he said, if I was alive as part of that generation, and I would have been involved in the determining which day should be the day that we mourn the destruction of the temple, lo kivativ ela ba'asiri. I would not have established it on the 9th as we do. I would have established it on the 10th of Av. Why? Rubo shel heichal bo nisraf. The majority of the heichal, the majority of the burning of the temple took place, happened on the 10th. So therefore he says, to me, the most logical date to establish as the date that we mourn the destruction of the temple should have been the 10th of Av, being that most of the temple was destroyed, was burned on that day. V'Rabbanan, so Gemara says, Rav Yochanan has a good point. And the rabbis who established it on the 9th, even though they all agree majority burned on the 10th, what was their reasoning? Why did they establish the day of mourning as the 9th? Atchalata depur anuta adifa. It's the start of the tragedy. That is the point that we focus on. Not when was the majority of the follow through, but when did it all begin? When did the destruction, the actual destruction, physical destruction, because the Gemara tells based on different verses, it tells about the 10 stages, the 10 steps of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, leaving the temple. And only once that was complete, only then were they able to actually burn the building. But it's the start of that burning. It's the start of the tragedy. That is where our focus is. The beginning of any misfortune is of greater moment, of greater import. We mentioned before in the slichot that we'll say tomorrow morning, we mentioned before the prophecy of Ben Buzi. Ben Buzi is Yechezkel Ben Buzi. Buzi comes from the term of disgrace, and he was willing to be disgraced for the sake of the Torah, telling prophecies, rebuking people, and they were often not all that receptive to what he had to say. Let's take a look in the Navi Yechezkel Ezekiel, chapter 24, verses 1 and 2. Vayhi Devar Hashem, Eli, and the word of God came to me, Bashana HaTashiyit, on that 9th month, on the 9th year, B'chodesh Asiri, in the 10th month, Be'esor LaChodesh, on the 10th of that month, to say, right, the 9th year, 10th month, 10th day, once again, that is tomorrow. What was the message? Ben Adam, son of man, Kitav Lecha, write, Et Shem Hayom, write for you the name of this day, Et Etzem Hayom Hazeh, the essence of this day, this very day. Samach Melech Bavel El Yerushalayim, the king of Babylon, he put his siege onto Jerusalem, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, on this very day. So we see there is an emphasis on this very day. And therefore, this is a day that the fasting must be done on this day. I mentioned before, if Tisha B'Av falls out on a Shabbos, when will we fast? Sunday, the next day, which is which date? The 10th of Av. Well, that's also an eligible date, a relevant date for the fasting. As Rabbi Yochanan said, he would have established that as the actual day of fasting, because that is the day that most of it was burned. And when we're discussing establishing a date, There it doesn't say be'etzem hayom hazeh, in the midst of, on this very day, on the essence of this day. Here it repeats twice, on the essence of this day. And why? So very good. So we have a scriptural indication that the fast day should be on the fast day, no matter when it is. Whether it's a Friday, according to Abu Drum, even if it is a Shabbos. But why? Why is this fast day different than the other fast days that we have this emphasis on this very day? So that the Chasam Sofer writes, and I'll read it together for us. The reason Chazal is the term for our sages of blessed memory, Chachamenu Zichronam Levracha. The reason is they established a fast for the siege on Asar B'Teves, as opposed to every other time Jerusalem, Yerushalayim was under siege over the millennia, is that on that day, in the heavenly courtroom, it was decided that the Beit HaMikdash was to be destroyed a few years hence. Meaning, whatever happens down here is decreed up above. So if the siege that led to the destruction began on that day, it means that on that day the heavenly court convened and the ruling was a future destruction. And that is why the first step of that destruction, the laying of the siege, began on that day. And there is a well-known Talmudic dictum that any generation which the Beit HaMikdash has not been rebuilt, it is as if it had been destroyed again. Which means, therefore he explains, every Asara B'Tevet, and as we saw in the Gemara above, that this was the very start of that whole cycle that led to the destruction. Therefore he explains, every Asara B'Tevet, on the 10th of Tevet every year, the heavenly court convenes and decrees a new Chorban or a non-new Chorban. They will decree, will this Chorban continue? Will this state of destruction continue for another year or not? That is why the fast of the 10th of Tevet, even though it is considered a minor fast, nonetheless has the potential to possibly override Shabbat. These explanations would certainly explain why we do fast tomorrow on a Friday for Asara B'Teves, for the 10th day of Teves. So if this is when it all began, it means that the heavens had their decision, not just their decision, their ruling for the destruction that would follow. And every year on Asara B'Tevet, there is that divine heavenly court convening to determine what will be this next year. I would just add that what's been happening in the world these past few years certainly is a restructuring of the powers that be. Certainly the powers that be surrounding our brothers and sisters in our land of Israel. And what has happened is really, really astounding, right? Almost like a 6-day war situation where there's been a complete reshuffling of all the power structures around, with Hezbollah starting with the blessed beepers, sending them where they deserve to be, and then Assad and Iran, and we don't know where this is all heading. But certainly the different structural components of the world as we know it have shifted and are shifting. So this is a very, very crucial time for the world, for the Jewish people, and for what our future holds. And as we've learned, according to Chasm Sofer, and we've seen, we saw from the Gemara, how the start is so crucial. And when it comes to the temple, the start is tomorrow. And that is the time that it will be determined. Things can always change after there is a gazar, after there is a decree, but it's always easier to change it prior to that point. So that is the importance of this fast day tomorrow. And I would encourage even those who might not necessarily always observe these minor fast days, tomorrow is a day, tomorrow is one that we should do our utmost to observe and to use it. As Rambam says in the laws of fasts, we'll go, Yesh Sham Yamim. There are days, Shekol Yisroel, the laws of fast, 5:1, chapter 5, halacha 1. Shekol Yisroel mitanim behem, that all of Israel fast, lemnei hatzarot sheiru behem, because of different tragedies, calamities that occurred then. And why do we fast? Kedei lo orer halevavot, in order to awaken, arouse the hearts. Liftoach darchei hatshuva, to try to elevate our game, to try to improve ourselves. Ata. Reminding us that all the tragedies were as a result of our not being as we need to be, and therefore, like we said, raising our bar. When we remember these things, nashuv lehetev, that will push us, bring us to try to improve ourselves. As it says, v'yitvadu et avonam v'et avon avotam. They will confess their sin and the sins of their ancestors. So certainly tomorrow is a time for us to have our tefillot, our prayers, that all of this movement of the world should lead in a positive direction, and it should lead to redemption for the Jewish people, redemption for the world. As the Navi Zechariah classically wrote, Ko Amar Hashem, the last of the sources, this is what Hashem Tzvakot says, Tzom HaRevi'i, the fast of the 4th month. That is the fast of Shivasa B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. Tzom HaChamishi, the fast of the 5th month. That is Tish'a B'Av. V'Tzom HaShvi'i, the fast of the 7th month. And that is Tzom Gedalia in Tishrei. V'Tzom HaAsiri, and the fast of the 10th month. That is tomorrow's fast day, the 10th of Tevet. These days of mourning, of fasting, of tragedy, of calamity, Yihiyeh lebeit Yehuda, they will be for the house of Judah. They will be transformed, l'sason u'lesimcha, for rejoicing, for happiness, u'lemoadim tovim, as happy celebrations, happy fast days, happy festivals, va'emet va'shalom ahavu. Truth, peace, that is what ahavu, that is what you must love, that is what we must take with us. So those are the unique aspects of tomorrow's triple fast, we'll call it, but why it stands unique, and the tremendous effect that this fast in particular has, and all of that is coming down be'etzem hayom hazeh, on this very day. Yes, Janet?
So the other 3 fasts, do they have a
The
corollary?
other two.
The other 2?
Wait, I'm sorry. What do you mean by the other 3 fasts?
You're right, the other 2. do they have a corollary in the heavenly court, so every 10th of Tevet?
Yes.
Reevaluate whether
Each
the
one.
temple's gonna
Each
be
one will
rebuilt?
have. Are you referring to like Shavasat B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av?
Yeah.
Yes, they do have a corollary, but we saw the Gemara that this was the very start of
Right.
it, and therefore, as the start, this carries the most weight.
So every 10th of Tevet, it's reevaluated whether in X number of years the temple will be rebuilt.
Well, I would say for this next year, what is in store for the temple for this next year? Yeah, being that it all started. Yes, I hear the point that you're making, Johnny. You're making an interesting point. So it was decreed what will be 2.5 years hence. So you're asking, is this decree also 2.5 years? I would imagine that in this case, once we are in a state of destruction, it is determining what is up ahead for us. I'm not sure. I would imagine even within the year for us and the temple. Yeah. Yes.
Going along the lines of that the beginning of the destruction is the most significant, could you take an approach of looking at the Soli code and taking the events and sort of saying that those are in some sense the precursor that sets the conditions? So translated into Greek, maybe that was the beginning in some way that.
In English.
I'm not sure. Was that a precursor for the destruction of the temple?
What?
Look, a demoting of kedusha, of holiness in the world, right, certainly allows for such calamities. It would be a stretch to say that the death of Ezra, if we're correct that it was a natural death,
Right.
it would be a stretch to say that that's what led, right? Meaning, we do have a concept, we have verses along these lines that before the calamity, God will gather in, take to himself certain righteous people. They shouldn't have to experience it. But Ezra was at the time of the start of the Second Temple, and it stood for 420 years. So it'd be quite a stretch to say that his death was the precursor for the destruction of the Second Temple 420 years later.
But could it be that had he been present, it couldn't have happened? Meaning, well, here's where I was going though. The Torah is the source of our strength, right? So it's it's sort of the weakening of the Torah being translated into Greek. And all
I
that.
agree certainly conceptually. A weakening of the Torah and a weakening of Kedusha is what opens the way for calamity. I'm not comfortable saying that, and that's why this was this triple, because it doesn't work for the three. Yeah. But certainly conceptually, I agree with that, right? When there is a weakening of Kedusha, of holiness, of Torah in the world, that is what causes this Hester Panim, as the Torah calls it, Hashem's hiding of his face, and that is what allows for humankind to not act human and not act kind. Yeah, if I may. Yeah. Okay. My friends, we will call it over here. Shkoach, everybody. Thank you for joining once again, and thank you to Dr. Ray for sponsoring in honor of today, which is the yahrzeit of his father, Wolf Zuckerman. Tell us about your father a little bit.
Beg your pardon?
Tell us a little bit about your father.
Oh, my father, he was a very, very interesting guy. He was born in the Ukraine in a small town called Konstantinov in 1900. And he was the youngest, I would say, of 7 or 8 children. And my grandmother and grandfather had a general store in the town. And they were middle class, let's say. And then after World War I, peace was not really there. The communists were there, the White Army, the Red Army, and this and that, all kinds of wars going on. And my father on his own said at 19, I'm leaving the Ukraine, I'm going to Romania. He was very close to Romania where he lived. And he went to Iași, the city of Iași in Romania. And the Jewish community there was very good to him. And he started university and he started studying medicine. And he studied medicine in Romania for 3 or 4 years. But they had a bunch of fascists in the university there, the Iron Guard, that was like pre-Nazis.
Yeah.
And every day my father said, we had fights, we had this, we had that. And a friend of his said, hey, there's a country, Belgium, which is liberal and free, and Jews live like everyone else. So there's no fighting every day. You can go to school and learn. So he transferred and he went to 1923. He went to Brussels and he worked his way through medical school, graduated medical school, and studied tropical medicine for a year in Antwerp. At that point,
Tropical medicine,
tropical medicine.
which means what?
Beg your pardon?
How interesting.
Medicine.
Yes. And
What is tropical medicine?
medicine of the tropics, a lot of
Diseases of
parasitic
Pathogens.
diseases,
malaria.
malaria, amoebiasis, giardia, all kinds of different parasitic diseases. So in 1930, he was offered a position as medical director of the Belgian railroads in the Belgian Congo. And he took the position. And he went to the Belgian Congo to a small town called Akati. And he built a hospital there and took care of the Belgians as well as the native population. And the way it worked in the Belgian, with this company, every 2 years he had 3 or 4 months vacation. So in 1935, he decided to go to, shall we say, Palestine at that time. And my mother had brothers and sisters in Palestine. She came from the States to visit them, and somebody introduced them. And they got married, and they lived in Rehoboth for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then my father said life was much better in the Congo. You know, it's a colonial life. They had 20 servants and this and that. And they went back to the Congo. And we were in the Congo. I was born there.
You were born in the
I was
Congo.
born in the Congo. And my mother was a U.S. citizen at the time, so I'm considered a citizen.
So you're
by
a true
birth.
African American.
You're a true African American.
One of the only few.
Yeah. So in 1940, the Nazis took over Belgium, and we had to leave. And we went to South Africa for 6 months, and then came to the States in January of 41. And my father was a very good linguist, and he really didn't know English, but in a year he passed the written exam for medicine and got his license to practice here.
Wow.
And he practiced medicine, tropical medicine and GI for many years, and you know, had a nice practice and a very interesting and enjoyable life.
And where in America were you living?
New York.
In New York.
In New York, Manhattan, we were living. And my parents were married in Israel. He said to me by Rabbi Cook, and I saw Rabbi in 1935. I saw Rabbi Cook died in 1935, so I don't know. I had papers. But
There are many Rabbi Cooks, right? You know, there are many Rabbi Cooks.
The chief rabbi.
But he said by the chief rabbi. Wow.
Chief rabbi.
Yeah.
I had papers in New York, but when I moved here somehow, they disappeared going cross country. So my father died in New York. It was the 23rd of December, but the date of his passing on the Gregorian calendar.
What year?
1993. He was 93 years old.
Wow.
And my parents are buried in Israel in Rehoboth. So December 24th, Nina and I at 9 in the morning go to Chase National Bank, where I had my passport in the safe deposit box. I didn't realize it would be closed the day before Christmas. So I had a hard time getting a passport. I had to take the body to Israel. And
Right.
I managed somehow, and my father and mother are resting peacefully in Israel. And I hope his neshama has an aliyah.
Amen.
And,
Amen. Amen. Thank you for sharing that with
we had a
us.
good life, and
Yeah.
you know,
And a good son.
and a good son, a good daughter,
Yeah.
and good grandchildren, and
Nice.
he's happy. He's
Nice.
looking down. He's saying, "My son is still keeping Judaism."
Right.
And,
Wearing his New
in
York
own
hat.
way. Yeah.
There we go.
He says, "Baruch Hashem," and that's it.
Yeah.
So, it was
Beautiful.
a good life he had.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're
Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for
How do you
sponsoring.
know all these details? Did your father write memoirs? What?
Did he write memoirs?
No, how do you know all the details? He told us.
He told us many times. Right. And, he delivered me. He did the